Welcome to another edition of When Black Men Talk. I'm your host, Mark Elliott. From time to time, we welcome in guests to Elliott's Loft and discuss something a little different than the two other gentlemen and I might be discussing. And this is one of those times. We're going to welcome in Dr. Susan E Schwartz, a lady that I came across a book that she wrote that just stopped me in my tracks: The Absent Father Effect on Daughters, Father's Desire, and Father's Wounds. Good morning and welcome in, Dr. Schwartz. How you feeling?
Good morning. Thank you so much. I look forward to our discussion.
So do I. Let's start with getting a little background knowledge about yourself, your works, and your practice. Let's start right there.
Okay. Well, I'm a Jungian analyst, and what that means is I work with people analytically, psychologically, internally to be able to understand what has happened to them. It's more of a longer term treatment, deeper in the sense of really go into more of the emotional effects, psychological effects, physical effects. So the analysis really is, and cultural effects as well. The analysis really means that myself and that person will be being very, you could say, raw in looking at what has affected them because, we carry a lot of hurt and loss and need to mourn so we can go on and be our best selves. And so the process of knowing oneself in a analytical way also includes the unconscious that one accesses easily through dreams, relationships, love, life, etc. But it also includes a spiritual aspect. I don't mean religious, I mean spiritual, or you could say one's spirit. So that's what I do. And I have been doing this quite a long time. And yeah, that's kind of answers, I think, some
No,
of the question
no,
was.
you covered it quite well. You actually do a lot. You're covering a lot. I'm curious. I'm curious to know, how did the book manifest? The title itself, and what made you stop and decide to write a book about the absent father effect on daughters?
Because a lot of women that I see were saying about the same story. So they spoke about when I would ask about their family life, whoever composed their family life, I would ask, of course, about their father or father figure. And almost all of them had only one line. That's it. One line for somebody, they might have been around for 18 years, or the father was absent, there was a divorce, there was no more seeing them, there was rupture, all kinds of things, but they said difficult things, but they had very little to say. And I thought, why do you have so little to say here? And when I would ask them if they had discussed the absence of their father, which was obvious if the father wasn't there, or emotionally blank, not very responsive, they said, well, nobody ever asked me about it. I would say, why did nobody ask you? Seems obvious. If someone's not there and not there emotionally, wouldn't you think you might feel sad or lost or upset? Hardly anything. And then I started looking in the literature. So I would look in the analytical literature, psychological literature, popular internet literature, very little until about the last 25 or so years, and still very little. And I thought, why is nobody talking about this? And so it piqued my interest and I followed it.
That brings me to thinking, why is that? When you think about the important role of a father that he plays in a daughter and a son's life, why is it that, like, when you went back and did a little research and analyzation, it was nothing there to be found. Why? What was your thought process about that?
Well, my thought process was enhanced by, of course, others that I read and learned about. But if you go all the way back to the beginning of psychoanalysis and Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung both had absent fathers or fathers who they could not respect, or fathers who were not emotional, or fathers who lacked a certain spirit for life, depressed fathers, absent in their emotional world. So that's kind of the beginning of the whole psychological movement, which has gone on. So one father passes to another, passes to another. If you haven't been fathered and you become a father, how do you know how to be a father? Not easily. And the cultures have not really promoted the emotional participation of fathers in a family for generations. And it's built up over and over and over. And, when things build to a certain point, it becomes a breaking point. And I think we're at that now in the sense that more and more fathers are involved. They are honored as people who have a contribution to the emotional well-being of their children, but it's still not that popular.
Very true. It's interesting because a lot of times, when society as a whole, when we think of fathers, we think of a provider, someone basically paying the bills, someone that has security, but we don't tend to lean into the emotional part of a father, the role that the emotional side a father should bring to a child. So when you said you went back and started researching, I'm not surprised. I'm not
Mm-mm,
surprised that not at all.
mm-mm. I wasn't either. And the other thing that I have found, the feedback from the book has been that daughters will say, "Oh my goodness, thank goodness somebody is talking about this." Equally, men will say, I have daughters and I'm not doing a good job. And
Hmm.
I want to do a better job. Thank you for writing this because it's like it says you're valuable. So the point of the book is not to say you're bad fathers. The point of the book is to say you're valuable. So be a participant. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and people feel relieved when their issues are um, noted. Fathers
Hmm.
want loving to their children, and oftentimes society does not really promote that. It's very sad.
No. Yeah, it is when you think about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I'm gonna go back to the title of your book because the words it kind of stopped me in my tracks again. And we look at pictures sometimes, and we say pictures, give off 1,000 words, but sometimes words themselves can give off many more. And so when I read the absent father effect on daughters, father desires and father wounds, it had me draw back a little bit, and it's like the effect. And this is the thought I kind of thought in my head, even thinking, okay, absent, he's not in the household.
Hmm.
But if a father's not emotionally invested with their children, he can actually be in the household and
Right.
still be absent. Your response to that?
Yes, and that absence oftentimes happens because he doesn't know how to express his emotions. So if the daughter comes to him with her emotional needs, he doesn't know how to respond to her. And he responds usually in a rather numbed out, deadened, flatlined way. He might push her away. And the other thing that actually happens that is a part of this is that usually once the daughter reaches puberty, many fathers get threatened. They don't know what to do. So they might be sweet to their daughters when the daughters are little because it's not such a threat. As the daughters get bigger and have their own ideas and their sexuality is coming out, many times fathers don't know what to do. and they don't know how to talk to their daughters. So they will push them away, or they will make amazingly awful comments to them about their looks, the length of their shorts, how they are looking, what they are acting like, oftentimes in very rude and crude manner. And what that does for the daughter is it makes her feel badly about herself and her body. So the father, and this is another place that fathers have been left off as having an effect. He has a huge effect on how she deals with her body. So if the body is denigrated by the father, she's going to do that herself, to herself.
Self-esteem. Self-esteem is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Dr. Schwartz, let's go back to, before we really move into the book, let's go back to when a child is a little girl. She's born as an infant. And this sense where the relationship starts with the father at that
Yes.
moment.
Yeah.
Let's go back there and let's move through life a little before we go into the book, because to me, I believe those early years are crucial. The bonding of the father and the child, the daughter. I keep saying child, I want to speak to daughter. Let's
Yeah.
go back there and let's speak to what's necessary, because a lot of times that's where the problem could start.
You are so right. But when you read, well, this is old, but actually not so old. When you read any kind of case studies, when people write about different people in psychological and psychoanalytic literature, they will speak about the influence of the mother from the beginning. Hardly at all do they address the importance of the father from the very beginning. It is amazing. The lack and absence is actually stunning to me, because you are correct. From the very start of, okay, this is a child we are going to have, there's where the participation of the father begins. At the beginning. Why not? He's a parent as well. He should be there, involved in everything. And then if he's involved from the beginning, then he's really emotionally moved and present, and such a benefit for daughters and for fathers to be there. Otherwise, the fathers are lacking and the daughters are lacking as well.
Yeah.
I just want to add one other thing to that. Quite sadly, it's promoted in our culture that who counts in raising children are the mothers. Well, yes, the mother figures count, but father figures also count, and equally, I think. And in our culture, still ours, I would say Western United States culture, doesn't push it, doesn't promote it.
No, I agree 100%. It's not, a lot of times dads are not looked upon as
Mm-mm.
being important when it comes to children. We're not. We're not perceived as being, necessary as a role to be in a child's life, basically a supportive role, not a leading role, not a first-hand role. And I will say this too, as a man, I've watched men in general, for the most part, relinquish that and think it's okay to kind of pull back and allow her to take the leadership role. And I'm not saying it should be a battle to be leadership, but some fathers have generally felt, okay, my role is not necessarily that important. And they kind of play into it. Into that, when that happens, the child suffers as well.
You are absolutely right. And of course, so there's, it's complex because it's the father and the daughter, but equally it is the mother who carries the image of whatever her father was, however she deals with her partner inside of her head. And this gets psychologically transferred onto the daughter. So if she didn't like her father, if he was not so present, which he probably wasn't, then in fact she's not expecting, requiring, or wanting that much from the father figure. So you see, it's a complex kind of agreement that everybody makes to ignore the father. Many layers of it. Yeah.
Trust me, being a father, I've experienced that, and it's reality because they expect most fathers. When I say they, I'm speaking from doctors, school systems. As a father, they expect you to basically show up and keep your mouth shut. And
Do
when
they?
well, I'm telling you, Doc, when they
Woo!
expect you to, yeah, they expect you to show up. If you show up, they don't expect you to show up. So the reality is, if you do show up and you're present, they don't expect you to say anything, and they
Oh my,
expect whatever they have to say over empowers you. And I'm like, no, that's not working for my children. And
no.
no, but that is what a lot of fathers face in reality. And for those that will not stand firm, like, no, And a lot of
Yes.
times, some fathers are intimidated by someone else's role. It could be an educator, it can be, a doctor, it could be XYZ, and they feel like they know more and they know best for their children. And that's when fathers have to stand tall and realize, no, this child was given unto you, was placed to
Right.
be with you. It's your
Right.
responsibility to do these
Mhm.
things.
Yep. I think you're so right. I'm a little bit astonished, but not astonished. And you can see how then the general culture gives up on the father and tells him he doesn't count and he's not important, and he buys it. It doesn't usually, you shouldn't have to fight for your own position, but oftentimes people don't because they didn't see it modeled for them. So their own rightness is now determined as wrong. And then the child, who maybe is there or not there, unconsciously will pick up the denigration
Absolutely.
of the father and begin to carry that in their own mind. And, it can exacerbate to a million different things where the father is put down. Then how do people unite with whatever male is about, whatever is masculine, whatever is different, whatever is similar? You see, it cuts at that, just even that vignette that you gave cuts at the entirety of how you live your life with energy and with assertion and with the right kind of power. So you can see generationally, look at how this has developed in a very negative way.
Absolutely. It's When Black Men Talk. We're going with the book, The Absent Father Effect on Daughters, Father's Desires, Father's Wound, was written by Dr. Susan E Schwartz, who happened to join us this morning to speak on it. And I'm loving the conversation. I realized in doing my research, you were brave in doing this. You allow women to project their fathers onto you, which I thought, when I came across, I said, that's really revealing. But that had to, woo, I'm sure there's some things you had to endure. I would love to hear about this.
Well, you know what? I liked the way you wrote that and said that question because it's not really allowing women to. It's that part of the process of therapy and analysis is it automatically happens. And I speak about it. I note it. And I oftentimes will say, well, so your father walked in the room. How are we going to deal with him? You see, so there's something about allowing, acknowledging whether he was good or not good, and most of them, sadly, were not so good. I find it better that he's there because now he's become more conscious and now we can deal with him. And they will, yes, of course, people in therapy and analysis, you project all kinds of things. You do that anyway in every relationship, kind of unconsciously project the issues onto the other person. I mean, we do this. You can have a partner and whatever, however they identify sexually, you can project onto them your father, whether they're your father or not. So you want to be conscious of what it is you're doing. And that's why when the father comes into the consulting room, I appreciate it because then people will be aware, not just what they're projecting out, but how they treat themselves. So I will oftentimes say, is that how you treat you?
Hmm. Am I understanding correctly? Sometimes when you had in your practice, the daughters brought their fathers with them to the actual appointment.
A couple of times people have, and sometimes people want to do that. I go, okay, because this is their process, and if that's what they want to do, all right. It doesn't happen that often because the concrete father is one issue. And of course, how one internalizes the father is another issue, and how you act out in your life, the father, and how he treated you is another issue. So they don't need to come, but when the fathers come, yeah, absolutely. Because what the daughter is saying is, I want you to see what I've had to deal with. And oftentimes, the fathers have been very open. They're like,
Nice.
yeah, it's great. They
Hmm.
want to be
Hmm.
there. They want to learn. They want to see what's going on. Yes, they want to be involved. So that's good.
Okay. I'm going to pull a few chapters from your book, and the first one I want to pull is the parallax. What is that? What's behind the parallax?
It's such a great word. I love the word, so that's why I used it. But it means a variety of perspectives. So the perspectives that I'm talking about, again, would be the cultural perspective, the family perspective, the personal perspective, the internalized perspective of the father and the daughter. So we can imagine, we all have these characters inside of us. And the question is, if we acknowledge all of them, our personality gets bigger, and we can access more of it. And we understand where we are deprecating ourselves, maybe the way the father did, or maybe the father deprecated himself and did not know how to appreciate his daughter. There's
Hmm.
one other thing I want to mention in that. This is kind of not so wonderful, but the father who envies the daughter and doesn't want her to be more than him. So unconsciously or consciously pushes down her energy. Again, there are many layers in this relationship. It's not just a two-person relationship because it contains what's going on consciously and unconsciously. So that parallax references many different sides of an issue.
You did not want your child to be better or greater than you. That's amazing. That is, yeah. Talk about
Is
being selfish. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but the reason I mention it is because it's awful to think about. What's worse is how often it happens. I mean, it's really in subtle and not such subtle ways. The father who is threatened by the daughter who will surpass him. And
Hmm.
yeah, he will put her down unconsciously. It takes a while, and consciously also. It takes a while for a lot of people to recognize that, but it's there. Not in every situation, of course, but it's important to recognize.
Okay. There was another chapter. This title sounds, ooh, it has a feeling to it of its own, but it's the dead father's complex. When you hear the word dead, you start to make some assumptions, but I really wanted to understand that. What is the dead father's complex?
Well, I got that from a very interesting French psychoanalyst named Andre Green, and he wrote about the dead mother complex. Well, or dead mother effect. What he was, and some people who follow that man, Andre Green, spoke about the dead father effect as well. What he means by deadness is not just literally dead, but dead emotionally, like depressed, withdrawn, too introverted, unable to express his creativity, his life force, his value. And that father is dead inside. You can tell he might be too drunk. He smokes dope too much. He's doing a variety of things to distract himself from himself because he's not accessing the depths of his personality and therefore is dead inside. What he passes on to the daughter is a certain deadness as well. And she doesn't learn how to become alive or to access her creativity and her life force. So, in a way, she spends time trying to make him lively, make him like her, make him see her. I mean, it's normal. That's what children do in order to grow up and be strong. But what happens is that um, what happens is that the father remains very dead, and the mother and the daughter, the daughter also remains dead until she starts to examine herself.
Hmm.
Until then, yes. Mhm.
Yeah. You touched on some things there, the alcohol and
Right.
drugs.
Yes.
Yeah. And, wow. Yeah. And the part about the creativity as well, because if you think about a father in general, if he surrendered himself to those two, alcohols and drugs, and he's really not feeling wanted or desired, what is he really giving to his daughter? You think about it, what is he really offering to a child or his daughter? So yeah, that dead father complex. Yeah,
Well,
here again. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead. I'll
No, I
let
was going
you.
to say when you look at the phrase, it really starts to make sense because when
Yes.
you first think of the dead father complex, it's like okay, he's not available, he's not there, he's totally gone. But in actuality, he's present, but due to things that he's feeling, as you spoke of being depressed and that those type of things, he's there, but in reality, he's dead.
That's right. And it's very profound. You
Hmm.
absolutely got it. That feeling of being around somebody who is always not present. So he's thinking about X, Y, or Z, or he is, he might be lost in pornography as well, or he's lost in some secret that he's hiding. So he's there. The body is there, but the mind, the personality is separated away. And so the child is around, it's like an empty shell. It's very spooky, and this child does not really know what to do. I mean, she really doesn't know what to do. And what she does, because she quite desperately needs a father figure, she tries to please him. And there is where she gets lost because she puts so much of her energy in trying to make him happy and come alive that she doesn't have the energy for herself.
You know what I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, and I'm going to take it away from the father. What you just said, what she tries to make him happy, she does all these things. I can see a woman growing into a relationship
Hmm?
and treating her mate as a dead father complex.
That's right.
Because,
That's right. And you're right, you can see the effects from how you learn, what kind of dynamics you learn, and how we repeat them in our intimate relationships. But you see, it would be safe for her to find a guy who is kind of dead inside because he's not going to require her to be too alive, just like happened with the father. So the repetition, here's the, generational repetition. We tend to treat ourselves and others the way we were treated. And this is where it gets very complex, but also very interesting to be able to unpeel the layers and start to come alive. I think that's the point, to start to come alive.
generational repetition. Wow.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's I'm going to visit that again at some point. But the idealization of a father, Idolization of a dad, a father, a tomb of illusion.
Mhm.
Whoa, come on, Dr. Schwartz.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well, look,
that's a title. That's a
I know,
title.
I know it is. So, but you see, if you idealize the father, given that we live in quite a strong patriarchal culture, it is promoted. How many daughters learn you better look up to your father, like your father? He's this, this, and this. The idealization is oftentimes wrong because then if she's putting all that ideal onto the father and keeps it there, where does she find her own ideal self? You're supposed to idealize parents when you're little. Then you learn, I want to be this, I want to be that. But you want to be able to access that energy that you've put into the parents back into yourself so you see what is real and you do not live an illusionary life. If you continue to idealize the father, you won't be able to idealize yourself or find a connection with someone which isn't ideal but real. Otherwise, you have to live in illusions. We see this all the time. So and so will say, oh, well, that partner didn't see this, this, this about me. Well, is that a reason to leave? Or is it a possibility to develop something? If you have to have everything gorgeous, as in an illusionary world, you're not living in the real world. And the point of self knowledge is to live fully in the real world. Too many fathers want to keep themselves as ideal, right?
Hmm. Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, that macho-ness basically, they have that shield where they don't want to see any necessarily flaws. They want to feel like, I'm it, don't see anything but what I present.
Exactly. And oftentimes the father will say to the daughter, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? You have to follow my rules. It's my house. Okay, it's their house. But wait a second. Let's negotiate here. And this idealization sends the father into his own kind of special place where he's untouched. It's really a position that again we need when we're very small, but we need to grow out of. Otherwise, we don't know how to operate in the real world.
Hmm. Let's move into the father's desire and the father's wounds, because they're on two different spectrums when you think about it, but we bring that together. So the father's desire is the father's wounds.
Yeah. Well, the desire for a good father or a good enough father or a related father brings with it a reminder of what you didn't get. If you are able to deal with what you didn't get, then you will be able to eventually get it. So, this, in a way, is what happens in the analytic and therapeutic process over time. One accesses one's desires for life, for partners, for, I don't know, being an athlete, whatever you want to be. You access the desires, love. But by doing that, you're going to bump up against the internal obstacles, and those are the wounds. And the wounds, because they're kind of open and they don't heal unless you really look at them, and they remind us of what we really need. Both are needed, both desire and wounds, and how to deal with both of these. So you get to have a full life. Unless the wounds are addressed, you won't get to the desires. And unless the desires are addressed, you won't get to the wounds. So they're quite connected for
Hmm.
growth. Yeah, for growth and
Yeah.
development. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. I can see that. I can see that they are. One thing too I noticed that was spoken inside your book, where some of the daughters, if I understand correctly, I remember correctly, were very forgiving of their fathers.
Uh,
Did that catch you by surprise?
did you read that in the book that they're forgiving? Did you?
Um, mm,
No.
I thought there was some I thought there was some I came across that were slightly forgiving of their dads.
Oh, see. Okay. Okay. The reason I say that is, yeah, I'm laughing a little bit like you are. Because I'm not, I would question if forgiveness is sufficient. So if forgiveness means both people are getting together and are really deeply discussing the pain, the repair, the love, where they went wrong, what they really need, that's another story. But sometimes and oftentimes people say, oh, I forgive so and so. But that so and so didn't do any work. And they didn't do any work other than say, I forgive you. I think what I'm saying in this is I think it's a deeper process. It's not just I forgive. It is, why am I doing that? And how will it help me? And how will it help a relationship with the father as well? And will it is the question. Just kind of a blank forgiveness, I think, is an unconscious move, and it doesn't deal deeply with what hurt the daughter and where the father was lacking. So nobody has to examine. And this whole why I wrote the book is to promote examination and really working with the issues. So life is better. So there's more hope, inspiration, creativity. You don't get that if you just go, yeah, I forget you. I forgive you. It's too shallow. If it's
Hmm.
worked, it's not shallow.
Yeah, I could see that, but I would wonder if the daughters that forgave,
Yeah,
are they trying to in a way just move past it and kind of basically detach themselves from it emotionally?
I think so. I think you're absolutely right. But if they detach emotionally, I'm not sure they got it because they just detached. The point is, figure it out and figure out what's going on within you rather than just, yeah, I'm okay. I'm detached. I just think it's too short circuited if you do that. And I also wonder if daughters don't suffer in their bodies as well when they just forgive and don't really work the deeper issues because they're if you don't listen to your mind, your body will talk. So they're both talking. I mean, some people, it's not unusual. Some people get sick if
Hmm.
they don't pay attention to what's going
Yeah.
on. Yeah. So that's
No,
why
that happens. Hmm.
it does. It does.
Yeah.
And people don't like to look at that necessarily. And it has, fathers have really even more had less of a noted impact on daughters' bodies, but they have a huge impact because so many daughters have weight issues, you said it earlier, self-esteem issues, self-image issues. Where do they get that from? Maybe because they
Hmm.
had an absent father.
Yeah, I'm sure that plays a role. You know what I would like to do? I want to do this again, but this time do a little different, and we take out the daughters. Now, I know you haven't written the book yet,
Okay.
but we take out the word daughters
Okay.
and we replace it with sons.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Now, that is that I'd love to have that conversation with you for the next time because I think there's a lot of common ground there, but I think there might be some things a little different.
Well, well, in a strange way, you might have a different view on it than I do, but I also I think there's differences, but
Hmm.
I think there are also similarities in the sense of the personality gets squashed. So males might react differently, partly because of culture, or what you learn. Many men whose fathers have been absent, of course, will oftentimes say they don't have anyone to talk emotionally to. Men don't talk emotionally. The guys talk only about sports. They don't talk about their inner conflicts and their inner selves. And did they learn that from their fathers, who were also not talking about their inside selves? And how do you learn how to love? If the father, this is true for the daughters and the sons, how do you learn to love if you were not given that by your father? Just
Yeah, I think
so
that's crucial.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I think the other thing that happens, and this is more with males than females, I think again because of our culture, how we get raised, but women tend to do more emotional sharing. Men want to, don't know that it's okay, haven't had it modeled enough. It's changing. We have to admit it's changing. Thank goodness, but not fast enough, I don't think. And they just don't have the words because they don't know how to continue the sentence into express more or ask more or reveal more. And it's way to the detriment of sons. And what they develop is kind of an inner secret life or silence, or they shut down their emotions, tell themselves they can't express. It becomes a very repressive inside place, more so for sons because there's not really as much of an outlet as there is for daughters.
Yeah. I want to have that conversation, but I'll say this for men in general. I think one of the biggest thing men really, everything you spoke of, tend to deal with, and maybe at the bottom of all that, we have a tough time being vulnerable. We just that vulnerability is, and partly due to the fact because we didn't see our fathers being vulnerable
That's
a
right.
lot. A lot of times our dads just weren't vulnerable, so you saw from your dad that strength is like you don't let them see you sweat, you don't let them see you fear anything, and if you were basically grew up on that, that's what you digested, and that's inside of you. It's hard to go back and kind of remove that. But as you spoke earlier, I see the tide changing, even in doing this podcast, and it's one thing I love about doing this podcast because
Hmm.
we men come up here and we open up, and I've pushed the show to where no, you come up here in a sense, and I say this, and it can be taken different ways. You get naked, and a lot of
That's right.
times people are afraid to get naked and just kind of be. And I think once you realize you're naked and you don't care about what people are thinking, there goes the opportunity to really be vulnerable and get some work done. Just my
That's right.
perspective.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And the getting naked is the process of analysis and therapy. It's like you strip off the facade and you strip off that need for some kind of ego pressure or ego performance, and you go under that or over it or around it into your humanness rather than into, I've got to put forward a certain image. And that pressure for image takes away the vulnerability. It's an important word to be vulnerable, important action, because one relaxes when you're vulnerable. If you think about it, I'm not saying it's easy, but okay, now I'm seen for who I really am. And that is so important to be seen for who you really are, not for some kind of facade or, like you say, macho kind of deal. What struck me as sad in all of this, and also as I heard daughters speak about their fathers, they expected so little. They expected so little vulnerability from the father or honesty of emotion long ago, they had dropped the expectation. And this happens to sons as well.
But why do you think that is? Why do you think they've dropped the expectations of their fathers?
Because, we automatically, when we're disappointed and really hurt early, people recount back, they can remember from like 3 or 4, and usually there's an experience. So it's not the only one, but they remember one or so that's pretty profound, where they were told, don't be too much. Don't push, or don't be too enthusiastic, or I don't want you to be too emotional. This is said over and over. They learn it, become disappointed. It's crushing because the father is really saying to the daughter, don't be yourself. And that is so hurtful because that's what we get born to be, is ourselves. And very early told, no, I don't want that part of you. I don't want you to be like that. I can't tell you the amount of stories. They sound just small, but they're big, small stories of being very disappointed in being not seen, not acknowledged, and told, I don't want you to act like that.
Okay. In writing this book, was there something that are some things you may have learned or noticed from the beginning to the end?
Much of what I have said is what I learned in writing the book, but also what I've learned in being an analyst. What it did was it accentuated what I had thought already and what I had felt already. And the information comes not just from people that I work with analytically, but from friends, colleagues. And I give you one rather extreme example, which is one lecture that I had given to a group of analysts. And one of the women who was an analyst was very honest. And she said, I forget to ask about fathers. So I was astounded. These are some of the things that I have learned that has accentuated my own knowledge. I wanted to add one other thing in relation to this, because it has come up at other times. People will say, well, how people identify in their masculinity or femininity, or are they affected by their economic background or their religious background? Is that a factor? It's somewhat of a factor. The biggest is the absence of the father. So that to me is what I learned over and over and over, is how this absence has affected people so profoundly. And really, it's affected our nation as well. It's a political statement also in some ways of how we are and how we assert our own agency in our world.
Hmm.
Yes.
Dr. Susan E Schwartz, the writer of The Absent Father Effect on Daughters, Father's Desire, Father's Wounds. I want to give you an opportunity, if you want to, give people a way to contact you. Of course, purchase your book, and because I'm sure there are going to be some that listen that are going to be amazed. And ironically, you're speaking on some things that some other people avoid talking about. And that's kind of, to me, going to be something that kind of jumps out, because a lot of times, as we spoke earlier about fathers, we don't go too in depth about them. Like fathers, we kind of leave it alone. But you have actually taken the time to understand, to dig into, and bring forth something that's present, but in reality, it's not present. So, chance that they can contact you, chance ways they can contact you.
Yes, well, my website is www.susanschwartz, it's SCHWARTZ, phd.com. The book is sold from the publisher Routledge, also on Amazon, eBooks, any online services. And I have on my website, I have sample pages from all the books and articles in case people are interested. And all my information is on the website as well. I also wanted to just add something that it's very important, and you accentuated this kind of looking at what most people don't want to see. And in a way, to me, that is what is exciting and valuable about having people see what is there about themselves that nobody else saw. And oftentimes, their father would ignore and absolutely not be able to see. So, to talk about the things that are not popular or need to be brought into consciousness, to me, is a wonderful challenge, really, to all of us.
There's always room for growth. There is always room for growth.
There is. You are right.
Okay. Well, with that being said, we'll bring this one to an end. I look forward to doing the one on sons. I really do. Sometime in the near future, we'll do the one. Basically, I know the book may not be written yet, but we'll give a little taste of what might be coming. And just kind of talk about the little differences that we may see, well, we may not see that where the absence of a father has on his son. But I appreciate this. This conversation was enlightening, this to say the least. And I appreciate you spending time and bringing forth.
May I add that I appreciate your comments and your recognition of the importance of, again, looking at what a lot of people do not look at. So your commentary and your questions have been quite thorough. It's been a delight. Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to doing it again real soon. It's
Yes,
Mark Elliott. Mark Elliott, along with Dr. Susan E Schwartz. We're going to say goodbye for now. You know, God loves you. We love you too. We'll get together real soon.